create some conversations. I think we'll dig into a couple of areas. We'll think about how we planned the project. We'll think about how we actually built things and what went well and what went poorly. But I also want to think about how you then deployed it, or what you went on and did next. And did you set yourself up for success? Is there something you could have done slightly differently? We're always trying to learn and improve in these things. If that makes sense, I'm probably going to kick off first with, because I think your microphone's on already, Stephen. So Stephen Trowell's the founder of PPB, a deep technology company. Stephen, you want to quickly introduce yourself and can you give us a tip?
A tip, yeah. So yeah, hello, yeah, lovely to be here. So I'm a background is as a biochemist, molecular biologist, spent 30 years with the CSIRO. Means I come from a very privileged position, as you'll see when we talk in a bit more depth about building a prototype. But my big tip is, with hindsight, I got stuck in the history of where we'd come from for too long. And I think didn't drop features that we no longer needed, where the use case had changed. We deliberately changed the use case, but I stuck with features for too long, and probably would have been a bit quicker and a bit cheaper if I'd been able to do that sooner. That's probably my tip. So keep checking that you're still got the same target, lift your head up and just check where you're going now and then.
So Stephen, that was your understanding of what the customers needed was evolving, was it?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we changed customers. Like, we changed from a defense customer that needed to detect an improvised explosive device to a food processor who, if they didn't get the answer in 5 seconds, they weren't going to have their feet blown off. So the demands of the technology demands changed. They were different. Some days they were easier, but not, so that's where that comes from.
Awesome. Remember, when you get a grant, you might have promised to do certain things as part of that grant, but it's often okay to go back to the grant funding body and discuss whether a slightly different milestone would be acceptable to them. And that's not just Innovation Connect, that's probably relevant to all. And if in doubt, ask. Awesome. Thanks for bringing that one in, Stephen, and we'll have plenty of chances to hear from you more. Zoe, do you want to quickly introduce yourself, your key project, and have you got a lesson learned to share?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the founder of EpiTrade, and we're doing supply chain provenance tracking goods from Vietnam through all stages in the supply chain. It took me 3 goes to get Icon. So my big tip would be, don't give up. That's sort of my only superpower in business, is just don't stop. But make sure you really listen to the feedback that you're getting for each rejection, and address it when you come back next time. So the things I did badly were quite different in pitch 1 and 2. Well, not even necessarily badly, but things I could have improved for pitch 1 and 2 I took on board, and then finally made it for pitch 3.
Persistence. Zoe, thinking about the project that you have built with that funding, was there any other lesson learned about how that whole thing worked, or did it just go wonderfully?
Yeah, so COVID kind of interrupted some of the timeframes that we had for what we wanted to do. So initially the idea was to pilot the version 2 platform with the new group of businesses we were working with in Vietnam. But because we had some delays in getting information to inform the development of the app, because we were taking a very co-design approach and making sure we weren't just building something without input from people on the ground, I kept pursuing other opportunities in the meantime. So I had an opportunity to get into an accelerator to scale our business into India. And we're one of the top 3 pitch winners to get support over the next 12 months to do that. So ended up shifting the Icon grant slightly to recognise that opportunity had come up in lieu of being able to get it into the hands of the Vietnamese users.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, things change, don't they? And COVID is a very distinctive example of that. Very big change to what you can do with travel, presumably changes to the way goods move around and all of that sort of stuff. So, and so it's a little bit along the lines that Stephen said, which is sort of adapting to the circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Now, so two very different products. Let's bring in a third very different product, and I think, or different sort of business. And is Andy Miller here? Zach?
Yep. Yeah, I'm here. G'day.
Oh, excellent. There you are. See you now.
So my name's Andy Miller. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Heaps Normal. We're changing drinking culture by brewing non-alcoholic beer. And yeah, one of the things in hindsight that we learned and that we've refined over time has been just being brutally simple about the problem that you're solving and how you articulate that message. I think the tendency is to want to say, we're doing this and we're doing this and we're doing this, and that you might feel like they're all related. But I think spending the time and it takes a lot of time to, the simpler you want it to be, the more time it takes, I think, to really, really kind of simplify that message down to just a few words, because it really, you've probably heard it all before, but it makes such a difference. And that's been a work in progress for us, changing drinking culture. We've got it down to 3 words now. So hopefully that sort of is almost there for us, but it's been a 12-month process just to get it to that point.
Yeah, awesome. Andy, I love that phrase, brutally simple. And I think it's brutal on yourself as well, or brutal on your ideas. It's not easy to do that. And I guess you can always have a slight, changing drinking culture through tasty drinks or tasty beer, or, absolutely. And is tasty the wrong word? Probably, sorry, but
that's all right.
Yeah. So now, and Andy, you're not necessarily what people might think innovation is, apps or deep technology, and it certainly can be, but your cultural innovation and product innovation, which is there's some different approaches on the creating a high quality craft non-alcoholic beer. When you think, so it's wonderful we can use that as an example so that people see the variety and it's, everything's possible. But I'm wondering if you have a different lesson learned than Stephen or Zoe with when you sort of started to do a project of this sort of icon size early in the process that you're doing. Did you have a different lesson learned, or?
In terms of the grant process, I think, that was sort of partly inspired by the lesson I shared earlier. I think Arthur and Zach really helped us kind of refine that message and put it into a pitch format. So I think, really utilizing the wisdom of the Icon Grant team, or it's changed its name, hasn't it? Connect Grant team. I think that's definitely kind of something I think that helped us a lot, and so I highly recommend doing that. But I think, to your point, think broadly about what innovation can mean, because for us, we're a tech-enabled company, and the that tech enablement, aside from actual digital technology, is actually yeast technology as well, and there's a lot of innovation that we've been doing in that space. So aside from the technical and innovation around new yeast strains and commercializing new yeast strains and looking for different ways that they can be used in the brewing process for different outcomes, there's a whole bunch of other different kinds of innovation, like cultural innovation, which is another sort of way that we're innovating in our category. And I think the result of that is seen by that we're already seeing, which is that it's innovating a completely new way of consumers drinking and relating to alcohol, and so that that's a sort of equally important part of the innovation landscape.
Oh, sorry, I muted myself. Yeah, awesome, Andy. I think that's really useful to hear. Now, I'm going to keep asking Andy, Stephen, and Zoe more questions, but everyone in the audience, don't be shy. I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know more about from someone who's really been part of this? And I already got a great question from Ben Alexander. He's directed it to Andy, but Stephen or Zoe might like to chip in as well, which is any tips for simplifying your message? How did you get it that simple?
Well, I think firstly, not trying to nail it first go. Write it down long form. Write it down as an A4 page full of just as a brain dump, and then go back past it, sleep on it, go back past it again, think about, well, how can I reduce, like, what words are unnecessary, first of all, I think is a great first filter. And then after that, what am I really trying to say? What is the heart of what I'm doing here? And what is just something that is peripheral or a bolt on, or, might be something that we achieve along the way, but isn't really the kind of, the core of the matter. And I think finally, if I can put it in 3 parts, the final one would be ambitious. If you're not a little bit scared about, how you're, defining your solution to the problem, then I think it's probably, it should be something that is like worked on, for the life of your company, and that's you can keep striving for. So yeah, that's probably the main ways that we did it. Anyway, I'm sure there's other great methods of simplifying that as well that maybe the other panelists can share now.
Totally, and I just love, engage. What you've sort of said is engage in the process in that way, and challenge yourself. Awesome, Stephen or Zoe, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, so ours is laboratory quality results in minutes. That's our 5-word tagline.
Nice.
I think, I get the message across. I think what helped, agree with everything that's just been said, but what actually helped us was workshops and accelerators, because being put on the spot and having to keep doing it and have other people look at it. So you just keep kicking at it till it feels right. That's what worked for me. Yeah.
And even grant applications sometimes.
Yeah. Well, then it gets put into the grant application.
Zoe?
I think so ours is powering ethical trade, and it can be helpful to just keep asking yourself why. So yes, there's all these features that we have of EthiTrade, like we're doing certification management now, we've got some augmented reality, we do the supply chain tracking, but I guess they're all features for what? So what is it ultimately that this is going to end up achieving? So just keep asking yourself, for what or why, to eventually sort of distill it down to something.
Yeah, why does this matter? Instead of what are we doing, why does this matter? And that's, if you think about Andy's catchphrase, he's telling us in that why it matters. Zoe, with yours, you're telling us why it matters, and we didn't actually understand how you're powering that trade. Oftentimes it's better to think about what we're trying to achieve than how we achieve it. Of course, you have to know how as well, and you have to have a story about that. And we're going to come back to how, because it sort of matters, because it's great to have this real big, ambitious, but brutally simple target. This is where we want to be, but you've got to actually do it. That was another thing I really liked in all 3 of you, is there's a big ambition in those, all 3 of them. They're not small. They're not saying, oh, I'm just going to do a couple of these things. They're very ambitious. I'm just going to slightly follow up with you, Zoe. Did you find it difficult to think that ambitiously? Did that come at the start, or did you work your way up to it?
I've always been pretty ambitious. I get engaged in a whole range of different things, and I figure, if you're going to do it, you may as well go big. And, hopefully you'll land somewhere along the journey to where you want to be.
Yeah, awesome. So Nat has asked, when testing a prototype and an early incubation of it, when is a good time to start considering the pitching for grants? I know I've got some thoughts on that, but anyone from the panel want to go first on that one? Zoe?
I'd say, yeah, as early as possible, because early pitches are a great opportunity to get feedback. And you can then take that on board for whatever you're going to do next. So as soon as you've got an idea, go for it.
Awesome. And Zoe stole my answer, so I won't comment further. Stephen, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, ideas are cheap, and particularly with hardware prototypes, it's expensive, really expensive to get things done. So, yeah, right from day one, it was. This is way back when this was still at CSIRO. Is how are we going to actually get this made? And incrementally, then, because you can only do so much at a time, there's only so much appetite. You know, what things have been done before, and so we can leave those, and which bits do we need to demonstrate for the first time? So let's get the grants for that, and that's sort of the strategy I approached all the way through, including for Icon, which was very much funded the final, well, the current user interface for this thing, and allowed us to do some of that real user testing.
So awesome. So in fact, you engaged with different grants at different times, and they funded different aspects. And I think
Absolutely.
that's really important for people to think. It's not like there's one grant and you've got to get that one. There's multiple pathways through this, and at different stages you're engaging in different things, and there's different funding opportunities. And you know, you might have got some research grants in that deep technology quite early and work with the government support and then an Innovation Connect grant. And then there's other forms of funding, including from investors, where you've, I think all three of you have made some progress on that. So, you know, and that there's a range of different stages of different sorts of grants. Look at every grant. If you're not, if they tell you you're not ready, you've still learned something, haven't you?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think you've got to, you know, I have my vision of where we're going to go, and then it's about finding the resources that there's no grant or funding source that will get you all the way, not that I'm aware of. So it's about finding the stepping stones in terms of funding sources, whether that's grants or investment or whatever, that can get you moving forward. So I think that's how you have to play it.
Awesome. Andy, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely back up everything all the other panelists have already said. I think they're great answers. So just adding where I can, I think maybe it's something that is sort of part of the founder dilemma, I suppose, of, you know, I feel like I've got to have a prototype before my business is real. And I think I just challenge that to try and, you know, like everyone has said, go earlier and, you know, think differently about how you can demonstrate traction. Traction doesn't have to be a prototype. Traction doesn't have to be sales. Traction can be simply your unique way of articulating the problem that you're solving, and then being able to, in some way, demonstrate that the audience that you think needs that problem solved is interested in your solution. And however you can demonstrate that, if you can demonstrate that at all, then you're ready for grants, you're ready to launch, you're ready to like share your idea with the world. And to give one quick example on that, you know, before we had perfected our product, you know, we'd spoken to like several customers around the country and different partners and other people in the space, and said, hey, this is what we're working on. This is what our position in the market is going to be. And this is, you know, here's a kind of early sample of our product. You know, what do you think? Do you like it? Would you buy it? And we used that traction to then kind of feedback, was to feed into the process and start applying for grants and talking about what we were doing.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Andy. And I think that's really relevant for people to think about. And the one thing I wanted to add to that is, Andy, you could also, part of that was you also brought into that your credibility and your expertise in the subject matter. It's not like you came into brewing and not knowing anything about it. So, the founders bring in certain backgrounds as well, and that can be part of explaining why we're going to be able to do that. So don't be shy about telling the story about the team as well. And I'm sure you did.
One more point on that. I think getting the grant is not the only outcome as well. So sometimes you may not win the grant that you're going for, but the person who read your application or listened to your pitch will connect you to somebody that turns out to be really valuable for the business. So there's a range of potential positive outcomes that can come from it.
Great point, Zoe. And we often mention one of the outcomes you get from an unsuccessful application is just feedback, and you mentioned that, but there can be other things. You get some exposure as that you're in front of a panel, or you're assessed by business people, and they might say, look, I think it'd be helpful for you to talk to this person or that person, and you never know whether, and I think that really has happened. We don't necessarily need to tell well, you can if you want to tell the detailed stories, but this is really cool. So thanks for that.
There's been an awesome question in the chat, which is very dear to my heart because we get it all the time in intro meetings. Should we patent before applying for grants? And I've got a bit of an opinion on this, but I'd love to hear the panel's opinion as well. What's the thoughts on your piece of technology? Should it be patented before you consider applying to fund it? Maybe Stephen? Sorry?
Zoe should go first.
So for me, your patents is only as good as your ability to defend it. And that's one approach to what you can do with your IP. And the idea is sort of 1%, and then all of the effort to actually execute on that idea is kind of the other 99. So it's not so relevant with EpiTrade, but I do have a paint manufacturing company as well where we make 0 VOC paint, so no volatile organic compounds, no smells, no toxins. And we could have gone down the approach of patenting that, but then we would have had to disclose everything, and it would only be of use to us if we could defend it. So we've taken a trade secret approach. So it's just a different way of going about it.
Yeah, awesome. And so that's a really important point. Patents aren't the only way of creating defensibility in your business or strengthening your business. Stephen, you do have a patent portfolio. It's substantial. What's your view on that?
Yeah, well, I think my view is it all depends. And so I think there is no generic answer. I think you have to look at every project. We're in the deep tech business, and there is an issue around you do need patent protection really to get leverage in that area. But that said, I mean, remember this, you put in a patent that discloses, or a provisional patent that discloses your idea, you then have to reduce that to practice. You have to show it works practically, and that takes, in the case of hardware and software, a lot of money. And so you actually may need to get the grant before you are resourced enough to actually stand by that patent and produce the documentation and evidence. And I'm not talking about what Zoe is talking about, which is, how deep are your pockets in court down the track. That's another set of issues. So I think it's a complex issue. You'd want to think through the specificity around your product. And certainly, even though we've got patents, we're also looking at having a second layer of trade secrets. So we sort of have that defense in depth. Yeah, short answer to a long problem.
Or a really complex problem.
Yeah.
Complex problem.
Yeah.
Can I just add two little things? And Andy, you chip in if you got something to add. But two little things I wanted to add is this: 99% of granted patents that gone through the whole process are never commercialized. So think about, you might want to test a bit more about the commercial potential of this before you invest too much in it. Second, and this is the sort of standard thing, get professional advice when you're thinking about patenting something, because maybe it isn't patentable, maybe it's a great patent. I won't be able to tell you. You'll need to get professional technical advice about patents. They're complicated. Stephen, did you want to add something to that?
No, all excellent advice.
Andy?
Yeah, I was just, again, agree with everybody else. So just add that yes, a lot, in addition to, depending very much on your industry and your use case, and, asking yourself, is this a distraction, or is it genuinely going to have a material impact on my ability to build my business? And I think then, looking at, like somebody else has already said, other ways of protecting your business. And in our case, even though our process is patentable, we decided that it was, a cost and a distraction to what we actually wanted to achieve, to go down that process so early on in our business. And we've just tried to see that there's basically applying for a patent would slow us down, and our best protection was speed and success in going to market, because there was a real window, I think, of opportunity, which we can now see in hindsight with the number of non-alcs that have launched in the last 12 months.
Yeah, there's a lot happening there.
Yeah.
Some would say not as tasty, but
well, we'll leave that up to the taste of the individual.
Yeah, awesome. So, look, Joshua from our team has passed on a question he was asked recently. Essentially, and you can read it on the chat. Essentially, the difficulty of finding the people to help them build this, right? And I think this is something that I do want to delve into a little bit, because knowing what I want is not the same, and even winning some funding to build what I want is not the same as actually getting it built. So how do you, and I'm just going to ask all three of you, how did you find the resources to actually make that project happen? And are there any tips you'd like to share with the other with an entrepreneur like that who's slightly struggling with it? Who wants to go first?
I'll jump in if you want. I don't know how to brew beer, so I probably could have done it. I could have come up with a company name and got a designer to design a brand, and then taken it to a contract producer, and eventually kind of got there. But would it have been as good? Probably not. I think the key in our situation, and I think probably a lot of others, especially other founders that I speak to, is finding the right co-founders. And so rather than trying to, find that factory or, build that prototype, or find somebody that, that you can pay to do that when funding's limited, and you might not necessarily know where to go to get that done. I think, find co-founders, finding a like-minded, person who fills the blind spots that you have in your kind of business. And I think that's at least from my opinion, a much easier route to take, to find somebody else who is passionate about solving that problem and fills your blind spots. And then they're going to know some of these really specific things, like where to get it made.
So Andy, finding the co-founder, building the team, diversifying your skills, easier said than done. Any tips that worked well for you to find those people?
I guess I was lucky because I had experience in the brewing industry. So I called up, a couple of the brewers. Well, one, I managed to nail it first time. The first one I called said yes. So that was just a lucky break. But other friends of mine, working on really, really crazy kind of deep innovation, deep technical innovation, like psychedelic mushrooms, to treat, serious mental health. Like, that's a hard co-founder to find. And he just, again, he tapped a lot of his networks, but also went to places like, where you find people with that kind of expertise, like universities, right? And I think the Innovation Network in Canberra is probably, it's a great network to start. So don't just think you have to know this person, within your own personal network. Reach out to other networks that, that might have access or be able to point you in the right direction.
Yeah, awesome. Zoe, what are your thoughts on that one? Getting the product built?
Yeah, so I've gone through a range of different models with EpiTrade. Obviously, developers are probably a bit easier to find than someone that can make a specific kind of beer. But we've used groups in Argentina, in Vietnam. We've had developers from Nigeria and China. So it just depends on where the talent is and being able to tap into it through various platforms. For paint manufacturing, which was a physical good and a bit harder, we went in straight at the start, setting up a factory, which probably wouldn't recommend that. approach. Start simple, like you think of your minimum viable product, your minimum viable manufacturing approach, and learn some lessons, and then work out if you need your own factory after, seeing how it goes.
Sometimes the painful lessons are the ones that we'll always get right again in the future.
Yes, I mean, we're 12 years in, so it's still going, but
absolutely,
definitely we picked a hard way to go about it.
Look, but no project ever goes perfectly, and I think you mentioned right at the beginning, it was a bit, some of your success has been about persistence and just getting there in the end. So it's a bit of both of those. Stephen.
So I said I was a biochemist, and this thing's got design, it's got hardware engineering, molecular engineering, photonics, software, So there's no way I'm on top of all that. I guess I don't know how reproducible my model was, but I started in an institution, CSIRO. But through that, I was able to use my networks, and then outside CSIRO, use the networks of physicists, engineers, people like that, to find the companies that could do that. So none of this is in-house. None of the engineering is in-house. We do it with engineering design companies in Australia. And interestingly, what we found, if I can offer something, is, there are some very big, very well-credentialed companies out there that you might know the name of, Invatech and people like that. And what we found is that we were way too small at that stage anyway, probably still, to interest those. And so part of it was finding not just people who'd worked for the money, but people who were actually enthused and would sign up to the vision and had the skills. And so a good part of what I've been doing over the last 10 years is finding fellow travelers, really, and building those trusted relationships with, there are some fantastic engineers, designers, hardware, software, etc. in Australia, really first class. And just finding them is hard, but worth the effort, every cent.
So, and you used a phrase there that I think is worth mentioning, 10 years, right? Sometimes it's not easy and it takes a little while. As you know, we tend to try and make things happen as quickly as possible. But no quicker than it can.
And just offering people money doesn't work. I can give you the example of a postdoc at CSR. So we paid this person and we wanted them to do a job, but they wanted to use a microscope. There's no way we could have a microscope in this. And in the end, I was never able to persuade that person. They were never going to sign on to the vision. So, in the end, you have to go with someone else. So it's very much finding the people who get what you're on about.
Which I think partly comes back to Andy's opening point about that brutally simple but powerful and ambitious, center guiding principle. And that's part of what attracts those people. It's like, see the purpose. Sometimes they just like playing with cool tech. That's okay too. More questions from the chat or from the audience, and you can unmute yourself and say it out loud too. Like Zach just did. And I hope we covered I hope we had the right answer on that IP question too, Zach.
Yeah, it was a good answer.
Thanks. I know, good. And Harold commented earlier, and I think it was responding, Zoe, you said you didn't get the grant first time. Remember, these things are often competitive, and grant assessors or grant panels are not saying yes or no. They're saying, well, we're making difficult choices amongst a range of very different businesses doing different things. And, so it's all, it's competitive. We live in a competitive world. When you get in front of customers, Andy's just mentioned that there's a bunch of competitors to his product. He's got to position it so that he finds a market. Although given your social purpose, Andy, perhaps you're happy if your competitors also succeed, which is often the case. In the absence of more questions from, here's another one from, Joshua's asked what I was about to ask, or very similar. So read my mind, Joshua. Great stuff. What next? What was your next step when you've oh no, he meant when you've received it. I was going to say once you'd completed the project. Maybe we'll do Josh's first. What was your first step when you got the grant? You know, just go celebrate. Did you think, oh my God, how am I going to do this? Andy.
Decide whether to put it on red or black.
No, we don't do that.
No, I'm just kidding.
I know you're joking.
It's a good question. I think we took a sort of moment to celebrate because it's a pretty kind of exciting thing to achieve, and especially really kind of early on, like most of the businesses that receive the innovation grants. It's probably one of the first points of recognition that you're on the right path in whatever you're doing. So that was sort of it gave us a great deal of confidence. It might not be answering your question directly, Josh, but I think this grant and similar kinds of things that we've been through as well. Kind of, I think what it can't be underestimated, the power of the belief and confidence that it gives you as a founder or as a founding team, and the flow on impact that has. Because I think obviously there's a great amount of perseverance and technical skill that goes into a lot of startups, but I think if you look particularly at I'm getting old, so I can say this, like young people, and their kind of belief, like their sort of kind of filtered belief, that they're going to achieve their goals. That plays a huge part in success, I think, and it's infectious. When you just know that you're going to achieve this, and you've got this huge amount of confidence behind you, you're able to kind of you're able to bring things to life and make them happen that where you otherwise might not have convinced people.
Yeah, awesome. And Andy, I just want to emphasize one thing you said: celebrate. Like sometimes we're so busy getting on with the next step, we forget to stop and celebrate. So do celebrate and that's a good milestone. Now, after that, you've probably got a couple more challenges. Stephen, Zoe?
All of the above, but I guess one of the things I did or was doing was, well, how can we multiply that money? All right, we've got this $30,000 grant, but can we then use that to leverage a voucher from somebody else? So that was, because I don't want this to be just 30,000 or 60,000 with our matching. I want it to be 90,000 or more, because then we can do more. So that's probably the first thing I was working on.
A really good thing to think about, and success breeds success, and progress hopefully encourages progress. So it's really good to think about, good, now what can I put into that? How can I bring in further resources as I make more progress? Love it. Zoe?
So for me, it gave me the opportunity to put back in scope some of the scope creep that had been taken out of things that we wanted to do with the platform, and to really enhance the focus on the user experience and get some proper UX design done nicely, as opposed to just me trying to work it out myself. So that was one of our first priorities for the icon funding. And then, of course, mentioning it in places as well to help give a bit of profile to the business and unlock other opportunities as well.
Oh, mentioning it. Good point, Zoe. We often trying to draw attention to our projects. And when you win a grant, that's a point. That's a point to celebrate that might attract more attention. You might get some media about it. And certainly Josh is part of the team at the Canberra Innovation Network who loves to tell stories about, success points for entrepreneurs, because we want you to all succeed. And that, grants can be part of that. Grants and awards are really, a nice, simple, clear way of creating a story to tell about yourself. And sometimes not with the Innovation Connect grant, but other grants are sometimes handed out by like a minister or some other VIP. Well, that's a story as well. And the VIP attracts attention, and that can benefit you. So yeah, great one, Zoe. use it to get attention. Tom's asked Tom's always good for great questions, and I like this one. What's the biggest mistake you made in this process? Any part of it? I don't mind. You tell whatever you want to tell. Who wants to jump into that scary water? Stephen.
So I'm not sure yet. I think that will come in. I mean, I've learned. I would do lots of things differently. I know that because I've learned a lot. And look, you waste a lot of time exploring byways that I now understand were just never going to pan out for us. I understand now in a way that I just never did what the actual drivers of different classes of investors are, and what sort of company they would characterize as such. So all of that is learning, and if I'd known it beforehand, I would have had maybe a more efficient path. But presumably the biggest mistake is the one I haven't yet realized.
At least you're on the watch out for it. Zoe?
I think for me, it was around trying to manage the timing of things during COVID. So we had this nice little time frame for, we'll get the requirements from the client, we'll build what they want, they'll use it, it'll be great. And then of course, COVID meant that our partners on the ground couldn't get out to the clients to understand what the requirements were, but we still had the clock ticking on when we had to deliver, because we had a commercial contract in place with our funding partner. So we made the decision to start progressing the development of the app because we thought that we knew what it was going to be. And then these little things came up that we realized what we designed wasn't necessarily going to work for. So there was a bit of rework and then delays and then more lockdowns. So I think just that whole process has been a bit of a challenge, and we probably should have stuck closer to our core principles of the co-design approach and just waited a bit until we had more information before getting too far down the path.
Yes, sticking to your principles, and it's very difficult in such a dramatically changing environment, but yeah, totally. Andy?
Again, I'm going to probably answer a slightly different question because I think the other two answers have covered the kind of the best answers in this space for me as well. But I think one of the biggest mistakes that I could have made, and that I'm grateful to have taken advice not to avoid, is I think at a top line level, making sure that you get the right co-founders, not settling on that, because I think the innovation team can probably they've probably got a proper stat on this, but there'd be so many startups that fail because the founders split up, and so making sure that you can spend every waking moment with this person, because any small misalignment that you have at the beginning is going to be amplified tenfold within the first year of your business. And then I guess off the back of that, something that we did was have some really, really difficult conversations after launching around, just verbalizing, things that, we thought were, misaligned or, needed to be kind of, made fairer, and in how we sort of structured our roles and broke up the business and all that sort of stuff. And having those conversations as early as possible, is critical. And if we didn't have it, I don't think we would still be going right now. So I think it's that sort of make or break. And they are so difficult. It took weeks, literally weeks and weeks of having the same conversations, some really heated conversations. And, sometimes we thought, we might just kind of, it might all fall apart, but the willingness to come back to the table and kind of work it all out between us has made us stronger as a founder group, and also means that we're now set up for, more longer term success as a team.
Totally. So sometimes we should have done it earlier, but having, the difficult conversation that, and really being I think you said brutally simple before, and I think probably what you're after there is brutally honest.
Yep.
And because you can't wallpaper over it, is I think what you're sort of saying. You know, if there's a difference, it's going to come out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, just to call it out, I think one of the challenges, I think, for any startup, and one that we wrestled with as well, was, you know, when you're excited about an idea and you come together with someone and you're both excited about the same idea, and your business is worth nothing because it's just an idea, you know, you're like, how about 50-50? Let's split the business 50-50. And everyone's like, yeah, sounds good. Let's just do it. I don't care. And then, you know, things change. Like when you get a product to market and people are like, oh, okay, this is a real business. Like, think this is actually happening. I think, you know, you start to reassess, oh, can I really sustain this? If I'm going to be kind of the one working in the business full time for the next 10 years and other people aren't, then, you know, is that something, am I happy with that? Am I going to be incentivized to put my blood, sweat and tears into this if we all have an equal kind of shareholding? And I think that's the really critical time to have that conversation, and that's what we did. So there's the kind of warts and all version.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. We probably, if we had more time, we could really delve into those sort of conversations more, because it's a really important area, is, you know, the core team, the founders, really finding the right arrangements. And the one thing I want to pull out of that, Andy, is it's not necessarily obvious on day one what that is going to be. And so, you know, but you were able to sort it out with a couple of difficult conversations. So well done. Well done. And then Lauren, John's just commented that he's working with a company that's sadly having a bad outcome because of that sort of misalignment, and including their family, right? So you'd think they knew each other in advance. Absolutely, it's tough. So there's still a few more questions on the chat, but I'm thinking. I think we're probably going to get back to key tips and wrap up fairly soon. We've only got 7 or 8 minutes. Lawrence has asked about getting to investors sooner or later, and I just think that's probably a bigger conversation. Sorry, Lawrence. But I'm just going to quickly segue on that one, because next week we've got 2 fantastic investors at our final weekly innovation challenge. That's Stella Zhu. She's a partner at Main Sequence Ventures, Australia's leading deep technology venture capital funds, and Tim Hurst, who's a very active local mentor and professional investor, and a few other things you'll hear about. They're going to talk about setting a company up for success, and we're going to come at that in a couple of different ways. And it's not just going to be the boring accounting, you have to do this, although we're going to cover that. So just wanted to tease everyone, next week's last session with Stella and Tim should be awesome, and we probably cover a little bit Lawrence's question there. We've also got coming up, I think in 2 weeks, a bit over 2 weeks, we'll have First Wednesday Connect. As always, that's an important opportunity to network with each other. Please be part of it. Advanced workshops are coming up, which is we've got if you really want to do an intensive sales workshop, if you want to do a workshop about finding investors, if you want to spend half a day negotiating, role-playing and negotiation between investors and entrepreneurs and learn about how term sheets work, find out more about that. Sorry, this is my little pitch list. And the last one I'm going to mention is everyone knows lockdown. It's sort of easing off. We reduced the restrictions. Co-working. Our co-working will be opening up, or is opening up, in a staged and careful way. There are huge advantages to being in a space together. Yes, we can get a lot done working from home too. we always see the positives, but if you're interested in that, connect with our co-working team, because there's awesome opportunities to be in a collaborative space where it's very beneficial. So I thought I'd just segue into that, and then we can wrap up by thanking and getting a last comment or tip from our panel members. Zoe, would you like to go first? Thank you so much. You made so many wonderful, insightful comments, and you've brought in one of your team members, which is awesome. Any last comment from you? Family business, awesome.
Yeah. I think for me, it just comes back to what I said at the start, which is just don't stop. Like, take the learning, the feedback on board, iterate, change up whatever you need to, and then go again, and never be afraid of getting out there too early.
Yep, awesome. Candice, our co-working community managers, put her contact details on the chat too if you're interested. And Stephen will go next. Thank you.
Yeah, I love to endorse what Zoe said. I mean, I think yeah, that grit to keep going is vital. And I think pretty much every case is different. So you've got to look at what you're trying to achieve, and then find out the resources that are available to you, because we're all in different circumstances. And so be really creative about how you can make it happen.
Yep, awesome. Can I just give a really quick shout out to Kitty? She's asked a great question about the connection to Canberra. Sorry, we didn't quite get a chance to really discuss it, but I've got to give you the award for best background. Just looks beautiful there. Lucky you. Andy, thanks to you for sharing some of those things very openly, and really appreciate that. Any last thoughts from you?
Yeah, I was going to use my last tip to cheekily answer Lawrence's question, just so he's got something to take away. I think if a lot of the funding bodies, VCs, angels, family offices, all of these different funders have regular office hours that they advertise on their website. So if you do your research, you find out which of these people or which of these organizations fund your kind of product or service. Look up the office hours, and you get to basically spend half an hour talking about your idea with an analyst who may or may not kind of then connect you with other people. And it probably comes back to the earlier question around where do you find these people, where do you find co-founders, where do you find other people that can help you on your journey. It starts with conversations like that, and I think you make use of the resources that are available, those people that are willing to give their time for free. The office hours are a great one, and you never know where it can lead. Could even lead to funding.
Awesome. Zoe's put her LinkedIn on the chat. Tom, please do fix the ACS. That'd be awesome. Everyone, thank you for being part of this. Thanks for great questions. I hope it was a fun and interesting conversation. And we'll see you next week, if not sooner, and keep on innovating.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.
Thanks everybody.
Into our panel. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Everyone.